What is going on, everybody? My name is Jay. Welcome back to Unplayable, and this is a channel where me and my friends like to talk about our favorite board and card games. Today, I'm bringing you another top 10 list, and this one is really interesting because Unplayable has primarily been focused on card games that we've been playing, whether it's cooperative card games and LCGs like Marvel Champions, or competitive CCG, TCG card games like Lorcana or Star Wars Unlimited. So today, I'm gonna give you the top 10 games, board games, for card gamers. Now, originally I was going to do the top 10 board games for Star Wars Unlimited players, but I figured we have Lorcana players here. We have people that probably play Magic the Gathering, all kinds of card games. So I made it a little bit more general and said, these are 10 games for card gamers. Now, I did put a couple of stipulations on myself when I made this list. My first one was not naming other TCGs or LCGs. So obviously, I'm not going to name any card games that are TCGs, LCGs, cooperative card games, Marvel Champions, stuff like that. I'm not going to make my entire list pure deck building games like Dominion and other deck builders along those lines like Star Realms, etc. Because this list could just be 10 more card games. I'm going to try to make them mostly board games with some deck builders in there. So obviously, as you were able to tell in my last video, I have a couple of games that aren't on the list, but I want to mention them. So it is that time of the video where I name my honorable mentions. Let's look at them. First off, we've got Veil of Eternity. This is a newer game. This came out in 2023, so it's pretty recent. It's essentially a card drafting game where you're just trying to trigger abilities and build an engine to score the most points. There's a circle of cards out there, twice the number of players, and the first player is going to take one of their 2 tokens, put it on a card so that you can draft it that round, and we'll go around and then we'll snake draft back. So whoever went first will put their last token on the last card available, and whoever drafted last the first time around will draft first going backwards. And then you'll take those 2 cards and you'll either gain those cards basically into your tableau or into your hand to reserve and play later, or you'll get rid of that card to gain a currency. Now, the kind of tricky part about the game is you're allowed to have 4 tokens of currency. Each token is valued 1, I think 6, 3, and maybe 2. I can't remember. Or maybe it's like 1, 3, and 6. Yeah, so it's tokens that are 1 value, 3 value, or 6 value, and you can only ever have 4 at one time. So if you gain 4 ones from discarding the card that you drafted from the orange character or category, you gain 4 ones. That's the maximum number of tokens that you can have. So it's kind of weird because you can try to get 6s, but you also don't get to make change when you draft and play these characters. It's a really cool system. It's all about efficiency and not messing up by taking too much. It's a cool concept. I think card gamers would like it. Next up is Shards of Infinity. This is your basic deck building game. It's made from the people that made Ascension, and essentially you can play up to 4 players, which is cool. You're gonna be deck building, getting new cards, and gaining experience, hitting your opponent's bases, I guess your opponent's characters, trying to be either number 1, the last one alive, or number 2, gain enough experience that you can play one of the base cards in your deck that says you win the game, which is really cool. I like it. It's a fun concept, cool game. All right, number 10. Number 10 is Raptor. This is from Bruno Cathala and Bruno Faidutti, who are a well-known pair of designers that like to make really good games. They did 7 Wonders Duel, and this is made by Matago, which is a stellar company as well. This is a 2-player only game. Now, card gamers tend to like head-to-head games, so this makes sense to be on the list in my opinion. And it's super asymmetrical. Card games, typically, unless you're playing a mirror match, you're playing asymmetrical sides. You're building your own deck, choosing your own hero or commander or whatever the case may be, and you're playing very different decks. And this is very similar. What you're trying to do is, or what you do in this game, each side starts with a 10 card deck. You're gonna have 3 in your hand, and you're gonna choose simultaneously 1 to put down and then reveal it. Whoever played the higher card gets to take actions equal to the points in difference between the card you played and the card your opponent played. Whoever played the lower card gets to take the ability of the card that you played. So if you play an 8 and I play a 4, you get to take 4 action points worth of actions. I get to trigger the ability on the card that I played at 4, which is a really cool system. If you play, and the higher the cost of the card, or the higher the value of the card, the better the action is. So if I can call when you're gonna play a 9 and I play an 8, I get to take that 8 action which is way stronger than, say, a 2 or a 3 action. So that's really fun. In addition, you only get 1 action point on your turn, which is bad for you because you want to play like an 8 or a 9 when I play a 2 or a 3 to get 6, 7 action points worth of actions. As a scientist, you're either trying to capture all of the baby raptors or put the mother completely to sleep so that you can continue without worrying. As the mother raptor or the raptor side, you're trying to keep your raptors from getting captured and eat all of the scientists. It's a really cool theme and it plays just so extremely well. I think card gamers would love this game. Number 9. Number nine, Unmatched. For me, I picked Cobble and Fog. That's the one that I own and my favorite version that I've played so far. This game is sick. It's a restoration game, so they brought this system back from way back in the day. At least for me, is way back in the day. Maybe not for everybody, but yeah, basically it's a skirmish style game. You can play with up to 4 players, or you could play head to head, or you can play 3 players. It's a really cool system. You choose a character. Some of the characters will have sidekicks, which are little tokens. The main character will have a miniature, and you're going around on the board and doing things, and each character has their own deck with completely different abilities in their deck, which is so sick. Invisible Man is going around teleporting between his different fog tokens. Sherlock Holmes and Watson are going around and just being gumshoe. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you flip between the 2 different characters so that you can be more powerful as one or the other. The combat system is where you're going to be playing cards and your opponent has to declare defenses to not take hits, and basically it's whoever is the last one standing wins. The line of sight system is fantastic. There's circles on the board that you're moving between, and if your circle has the same color around the ring, then you can see to that other ring. It's really simple. You don't have to question anything, and it lets you have a type of line of sight system. I think this game's great, and yeah, that's why it's my number 9. Number 8, Dice Forge. Now, this one specifically, if you play Dice Masters, Star Wars Destiny, something along those lines, then this gives you even more of the card gamey feel. But the reason I think this game is a game that card gamers would like, because of the combos that acquiring the different cards in this game can build up. And there's an upkeep phase where some of the cards give you an ability to gain additional resources. But essentially on your turn, you're going to be rolling your 2 dice. You gain the resources or points or whatever, and then you can acquire cards. You can acquire additional dice sides, which is really cool. You take the die, you flip out the side, you put the new side in. Now your die is even better. That's probably the coolest gimmick about the game, is that you're going to be changing the actual die that you're rolling. They're nice little plastic dice. Some people say it's a little fiddly. I don't think it is at all. I never have an issue. You just take the die side, you pop the die side out, put the new one in, you're ready to go. There's tons of different die faces that you can upgrade to. There's a bunch of different cards that can be in the tableau or the market for you to upgrade to or acquire, and you don't use all of them in every game, which is really cool. So every game feels pretty dynamic based on what cards come out to be able to acquire. And then at the end of the day, it's whoever has the most points. I think it's a really extremely fun game. It's snappy. It doesn't take that long to play, even at the max player count. And just the combos are really fun. So that is my number 8, Dice Forge. Number 7. Now, what's one of the mechanics that card gamers really like? Drafting. So I have a drafting game on my list, except it's not just drafting. Although I would argue the drafting portion of this game is one of the most critical points of doing well and succeeding in this game. Blood Rage. This is from Eric Lang, Cool Mini or Not. This is an older game. I rate it highly. I think it's extremely fun and it's not that difficult to play. Another thing about this game too is you only take 1 action on your turn. So number 1, the time between turns is low. Plus, in Star Wars Unlimited or Star Wars Destiny and a couple other card games, you take actions back and forth. And this one really gives you the feel of that. You get to take 1 action on your turn, and then your opponents have a chance to react to it, especially with the way the combat works in this game. There's 3 ages. You start each age with a draft of cards from that age. You can draft upgrades, you can draft combat cards, you can draft monsters that you're going to be able to play on the board, all kinds of stuff. And essentially you have a certain amount of rage for the entire age, and once you run out of rage, you're done for the age, and you go to the next one and you do similar stuff. You're going to be using this rage to place your characters out on the board, your monsters out on the board, doing upgrades, moving from one place to the other, pillaging, trying to get points. You get points by going up tracks, so as you pillage, you'll be able to upgrade how much rage you start with, how many miniatures you can have on the board, how many points you get from winning a combat. And then combat is all players involved in the combat put a card in, reveal at the same time. If you have modifiers from your hand, that's the time you get to play them, and whoever has the most wins. Tie, everybody loses. You get points for losing characters that go to Valhalla, and you get them back at the end of the age. All kinds of crazy stuff, and the combos that exist from the cards that you draft are so good and critical to, like I said, doing well. I think this was one that immediately came to mind as a game that I think card gamers will like, especially because the draft is so impactful. So that's my number 7. Number 6, Fantasy Realms. Now this is another game that you can kind of consider as a drafting game. I think it's not exactly drafting, but it's similar. Essentially, you have 7 cards that you're on your turn or in your hand. You will always have 7 cards in your hand. You will end the game with 7 cards in your hand. What you want to do is have the highest possible score you can have in your hand at the end of the game. So you might have a card that's a shield and it says it's worth 5 points, but it's worth plus 25 points if you also have a sword in your hand. And the sword will say it's worth 10 points, but it's worth plus 25 points if you have the shield in your hand. So if you have both of those together, it's gonna be worth like 70 points or something. And then you have other cards that are like, this gives you plus 30 if you have a king or a princess or a queen, but it's worth minus 20 if you have for each land you have in your hand or storm you have in your hand. And then there's cards that are like blank all the storms in your hand so you don't get those negative effects. There's a lot of different abilities in the game, and it's all about trying to score the maximum. So there's a deck in the middle everybody's drawing from. On your turn, you either draw from the deck or you take a card that's in the center. If you take a card from the deck, you put one of the cards in your hand into the center. You can also put the one you just drew. If you take from the center, you add it to your hand and then pick one of the other cards in your hand, put it down into the center. And that happens and goes around until there's up to, I think, 10 cards in a 2-player game. 12 cards, I believe, that are in the center. And then you drop your hand and you score it. And there's a awesome scoring app to be able to help you do all the scoring in the game. It's a really entertaining game. A game I think is kind of underrated. I love playing this game. I rate it really highly. It's not long. It takes maybe 20 minutes, and that's including scoring and teaching someone who has never played before. I think this game's fantastic. So that's it for me. Fantasy Realms. Number 5, Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North. This is a game from Ignacy Trzewiczek and Portal Games in their Imperial Settlers universe. This one is way better than Imperial Settlers, I think, in my opinion. Basically, when you set up, you're gonna choose a faction, and then they have their own special deck that has been pre-built for you. Pretty much like playing a pre-built starter deck or something like that in a card game. And you're going to be gaining resources, taking actions. I think you can take 2 actions on your turn. There's this cool system of a little wheel where you're going to take an action, you put one of your discs on it. For your second action, you're going to be putting your disc on the action wheel again, but it has to be on an action that's adjacent to one of the ones you already placed, or the one that you already placed. And then that's going to be the end of the round. You go to the next round, do upkeep, all that kind of stuff, and then take actions again. You can go on raids. You play cards down that you're going to be able to tap and get resources or do special abilities to try and get points. And whoever has the most points at the end of the game wins. I think this fits really well with the card gamer theme because you're going to be drawing from your deck, trying to build combos that exist in your deck, trying to gain resources in a resource management style of optimization. I think it's really unique. It's really fun. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I don't think I've played a game of this after a teach that lasted more than an hour. I really enjoy it. I think it's a great, fantastic game. That's Empires of the North. Number 4. Now this is one of my favorite games of all time. Clank, a deck building adventure. Now I have played Clank in Space. I still think I prefer the original Clank. I have a bunch of the expansions that make it more interesting and have a little more balance to the actual board. Tons of cool new cards that go into decks. I have the ones where you get to start with asymmetrical decks and have miniatures, all that kind of stuff. And then there's Clank Catacombs, which surprisingly I have not played. I really want to, because Clank I love, but I haven't played that one yet. So I put Clank, the original, on my list. This is a deck building game. For those who don't know what a deck building game is, you start with like 10 cards in your deck, you draw 5, play as much as you want, and then draw back up to 5 at the end of the round, play as much as you want, draw back. But you're acquiring cards. So as you acquire cards, they go into your discard pile, and when you have to shuffle, they shuffle into your deck and you have a chance of drawing them when you go back through, acquire more cards, and your deck keeps getting bigger and bigger with more and more combos and stronger cards that you acquire throughout the game. That's why it's called a deck builder, because you're building your deck as you go. You do that in this game, except you're going down a board. In the base game, you start outside, you go down below into this dungeon, and there's a dragon that's trying to sleep, and you go down and you're trying to acquire as much loot as you can and make it back up before the dragon wakes up and eats everybody. Now there is a chance, which I haven't had happen very often, where if you don't make it out before the dragon wakes up, then you get eaten and you score like 0 points, which is kind of thematic and funny, but it doesn't happen very often, and you're kind of pushing your luck if you stay down there trying to gather too much loot. Whoever is the first one to leave the dungeon, make it back out with all their loot, triggers a certain amount of rounds before the dragon wakes up, essentially, or at least speeds it up so that the dragon is going to wake up for sure. And there's just so many combos and cool things you can do. Loot is variable points system, so the further down into the dungeon you go, the more points that the loot that you're going to be picking up is going to be worth. It's so much fun. I always have an absolute blast when I take this out. It's easy to teach. You can teach it to anybody that plays games or card games and get it done and played in an hour. Fantastic game. Clank. Number 3, Res Arcana. Res Arcana is really unique. It's from Tom Lehman, who has created Race for the Galaxy and Roll for the Galaxy. Race for the Galaxy almost made my list. I just think it's hard to teach and it's hard to learn if you don't have someone that teaches you. So I didn't include it. But Res Arcana, very simple. There's 5 different resources. Some would say that's like magic. And you're spending these resources to play cards from your deck. Oh, I didn't mention, at the start of the game, you're given, I think, 8, maybe 10 cards to form your deck, and that's all the cards you have for the game, and it's completely random every time. And then you also start with a special character that you are, a special wizard, rogue, or whatever character that you are that has a special ability, which is usually a different type of income, something like that. But you're going around taking an action every turn, either playing a card, tapping a card to gain resources, tapping a card to gain an ability, acquiring one of the special cards that are in the tableau that score you a bunch of points at the end of the game, or not at the end of the game, score you points during the game, because whoever gets to 10 points first is the winner. The first player token has a point on it, so if you are at 9 and you take the first player token, you're then at 10, which triggers the end of the game, which is really cool. And all of the special cards and abilities on all the cards that you randomly get assigned are really unique. It makes you feel like you're playing a different game every time you play because you have a different deck, kind of like Keyforge or something like that, where you're given a set of cards. You have to make the best out of what you're given and acquire those cards that are those tablet-like cards in the center of the game or in the center of the table to try and score a bunch of points. It's really unique, good artwork, I like it. That is Res Arcana. Number 2, Dune Imperium. Dune Imperium is an incredibly popular game, even enjoyed and played by the likes of someone like Mr. Beast, who threw his own tournament. Dune Imperium is a deck building worker placement game and incredibly tight resource management game. You are gaining resources and gaining cards, and you're trying to use these resources and cards to string together combos to be able to place your workers, get an additional worker, win combats, go up tracks for affiliations with different factions. You're trying to vie over control of water. You're gaining entry cards, which are special one-time abilities that you can play, or just straight up points at the end of the game. You're trying to be the first one to go up tracks to gain additional points. And this is another one like Res Arcana that I just talked about. It's the first one to get to a certain point threshold, triggers the end of the game, and then at the end of the round, whoever has the most points wins. Same thing as Res Arcana. I actually kind of really like games that do that because you get to decide how quickly the game, number one, it's variable rounds. So you're not like, all right, it's round 9, I only have one more round, I better do the best I can. You can kind of manage deciding how fast you want the game to be or how long you want the game to be, at least as a group, because it's a race. I actually like games that do that a lot. I think the combat system in this is not terrible. It's fine. There's a little bit of hedging your bets based on different cards, entry cards your opponent can have that gives them additional combat for the fight. But there's also a kind of predeterministic advantage where you can see how many that your opponent has contributed to a fight. So if you don't think you're going to win, you can just contribute 1 or 2 so that you can try to get 2nd or 3rd place, or you can just not even worry about it. And save up for the next round. I think Dune Imperium is going to be here for a long time. It's very popular, very well liked. It's number 6 ranked of all time. So Dune Imperium, my number 2. My number 1. This is a special game to me because it's a game that my wife bought me, I guess on a whim, or saw it on TikTok, I'm not sure, and she plays it with me quite often. It's called Radlands. Radlands is another head-to-head 2-player only game that's not too heavy, but it has some cool combos that exist. You're basically trying to destroy 3 of your opponent's bases, and it's got a lane system where people in this lane will attack people in that lane, or people and the bases in that lane. There's a huge deck of cards that are different bases that you can start the game with. You start with 3, each one is unique, and each game feels unique because you can get a different slew of bases that you start with. And then there's a huge deck of cards of unique characters that you and your opponent draw from to kind of use them to gain resources, use them to play into your lanes, trying to vie over control of the middles or the lanes so that you can clear them out and hit their base, because you can't hit their base until you've got a direct line of sight to it. It's very fun. There is a 3 mana system. Every round you're gonna have 3 mana. If you don't spend one of them, then you can basically gain a water tower, which is an extra mana on the following turn, so you can have up to 4 resources on the following turn. It's very tight, but it's also so much fun to play. The artwork and production of this game is absolutely phenomenal. I love it. Me and my wife really enjoy playing this one. We get really cutthroat when we play it, which is always fun because yeah, Radlands has just been fantastic. They have a new expansion coming out for it at Gen Con, and I'm super stoked. It's just a very small addition of cards or bases, and I think some cards that go into the main deck, but it all still fits into the original box of the game. This is one that I think card gamers will really love playing. All right, that's it. Thank you for watching. This has been my top 10 games, board games for card gamers, Star Wars Unlimited gamers, Magic players, any kind of LCG player, all that kind of stuff. This is my top 10 games that I would recommend to people who like playing CCGs, TCGs, LCGs. So I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, we'll see you on the next one. Bye.